Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, your boy Virtus here, and welcome back to my Unreal Engine 4 Legends of Zelda livestream series. In today's video we are going to be continuing where we left off, and we are going to be working on the heads up display for our game. Now, as of right now in our project we've got some basic character movement, so we can walk forwards, left, back, right, and all of that good stuff. But as of right now, there's no sort of interactivity. You can't see the health of the player, you can't see how many gems you've got, how much magic you've got, and all of that good stuff. And that is going to be something that we are going to be implementing as part of the heads up display. So for those of you that don't know what a heads up display is, it's essentially a layer of information that is going to be displayed on top of the player's screen to help them understand sort of where they are in the game. So we're going to be showing things like the health, the magic, and the number of rupees that the player does have. Now, with this heads up display, this is something that I have created myself and is completely free for all of you guys to use. If you want access to this, you just need to make sure you have the latest version of the Zelda project files, as inside of there you have got a Photoshop document. Now, what I've also done is exported out the elements that we need to bring into Unreal Engine 4, and that is the to fill and no fill images for the hearts and also the gems, and we're just going to be simply importing them in. If you wanted to, you could go and make your own heads up display in Photoshop, and all you're going to need with that is just a picture of the gem and then the filled version of your health bar and the no filled version, but the rest is up to you. So if you want the latest version of these project files, all you've got to do is just go ahead and click that link in the description. I'd also like to take a moment to say a massive thank you to the Patreon supporters that have made this live stream possible, and as a reward, if you want to skip all of these tutorials and just have the Zelda game inside of Unreal Engine 4, you can just go ahead and download that as a Patreon. Just check out the link in the description. Also, if you have any questions whatsoever regarding this series, if you need some help, you can always join our Discord server, as we have over 1,000 other youth Unreal Engine 4 developers in there. You are going to get help from myself, my moderators, or just any old part of the community. It is entirely up to you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the engine and get started. So what we need to do then is we need to import the graphical elements of this heads up display into the engine. So what I'm going to do is, with my Zelda project folder, the little blue one that I've created here already, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new folder called HUD assets, just like that, and then I'm going to proceed to open this up. Now inside of here we need to import the graphics, so what I'm going to do is in my sort of file explorer, I'm going to select my fill image, my gem, and my no fill, and then I'm going to simply drag and drop this into the content browser to bring it into the engine. Now what we need to do is we need to turn this into a user interface widget so that we can actually display it on the screen. So what I'm going to do is right click, go to user interface, and create what's known as a widget blueprint. This widget blueprint is going to be a type of blueprint with a design view that is going to allow us to put all kinds of interactive and graphical elements on there, and then we can add it to the screen using blueprints. I'm going to give this the name Link HUD for now, and then with this just go ahead and double click to open it up. It may take a couple of seconds at first, and then we're going to make this nice and big. And what you'll notice in this main section of the screen here, this is where we're going to be putting our heads up display. On the left hand side we've got our palette, which is going to be the various types of sort of elements that we're going to need for any user interface. So we got things like buttons, images, progress bars, text boxes, text, sliders, and all of that good stuff. Now what we're going to be using for the purpose of this video is going to be images, progress bars, and text. So let's just start off with the top. An image is essentially just a static image. It's not going to sort of animate or anything like that, and that is what we're going to be using for the little gem or rupee icon in the bottom left. To the right of that, we've got some text. Now we're going to be using this as a text instead of an image because it is going to change. It needs to be dynamic. So we'll just be using the text for that. And then in the top left, we have got what is known as two progress bars, one for the health, one for the magic. And these are just going to allow us, Unreal Engine is going to allow us to style these progress bars to make them look the way that we want them to and to behave the way that we want them to. And of course, we can also bind this later on to a variable so it knows sort of how far along the progress bar should be. So it's going to link it to the health. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to start off by bringing in the icon for the gem. So I'm going to go to my palette in the top left and just drag in a image. And then with this, if we go to appearance and to brush, this is where we are going to be controlling the look of this. And if I just go to the bit where it says none here, click the little drop down and just type in gem. And you'll notice we got this file here called gem_new. That is what it's called in the content browser. Just go ahead and use this. Then from there, you'll notice almost straight away that it's going to change to the image of the gem. What I'm going to do is just use these little notches around the edge to just resize this, and then I'm just going to click, drag and place that in the bottom left hand corner of my screen. Now, because I don't want this to go flying around sort of depending on the player's screen resolution, I'm going to go to anchors and I am going to anchor it to the bottom left hand corner of the screen, just like that. Now, one thing I do want to mention is when you're designing a heads-up display, whether that's sort of in a widget blueprint or in Photoshop, make sure you keep yourself a little bit of distance from the border so that if the player has a weird aspect ratio, so if their resolution's not 1920 by 1080, it's not going to get cut off. And you can see that border. If I go to my Photoshop document, you can see I've got that little bit of extra space around the edge there. So moving on from there, what I'm also going to do is grab a sort of text, bit, and just drop it in just like that. And then for the content, I'm just going to set this to 0, for now, just so I can see what it's going to look like. And I am sort of roughly happy with that, so I'm not going to worry about changing the font size and the font family and the color. I'm going to leave it exactly where it is at the moment. If you wanted to, you guys can do that, but for me, that is all good. Moving on from there, we are going to need two progress bars, one for the health and then one for the magic as well. Now, in terms of styling these can be a little bit difficult, so I'm going to try and break this down in the most simple, easy way possible. Now, essentially, the way that these progress bars are going to work is if you want to use images, you're going to have a background image, and you're also going to have a fill image. And then with the percentage, it's just going to move along that, sort of fading between the two images, depending on the binding that you've created and any styling. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start off with the bottom one. Now, you'll notice I didn't export out an image, and the reason why is because it is just a flat color. So I can actually do that with the fill color inside of Unreal Engine instead of having to use an image. So what I'm going to do is leave the background color gray as it is, but over here under appearance where it says fill color and opacity, I am just going to click on the blue strip and choose a different color, and the color that I'm going to choose is going to be a little green color like that. And if I move my percentage now, you can see it looks similar to how I'm going to want it. Now what I will need to do is sort of drag this out a little bit just like that, but we're going to be moving the shape of this bar once we've got the hearts in our game as well. So let's just leave that for a moment and move on to the hearts. So if we go to the background image with our health bar progress bar selected, what we need to do is from the drop down just select that and then just type in no fill. because that is the name of the hearts without the fill color in it. And you'll see we'll get our hearts in here. Set your margin to 0, and then what you want to do is simply just stretch this out until they are in the shape that you are after. And then with this, we are just going to close the background image for a minute, go to fill image, and then with this just type in fill, and then if you notice, if we go from left to right with the percentage now, making sure we set our margin to 0 as well, it's filling it in. But there's still this blue overlay, so I'm just going to set my R, my G, and my B to 1. And then if I move my percentage, it's filling the hearts with this red gradient that we created earlier on, and it's looking really, really nice. So what I'm going to do is, before I sort of attach this to any code as far as sort of health and magic and rupees is concerned, I'm going to show you how to get this displayed on the screen. And the way we're going to do this is by opening up our blueprint for our third person character, the one that actually contains all the character information and should actually contain the heads up display information. Is I'm going to find some space at the top, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to type in event begin play. With this, I'm just going to type in create widget, so just drag out from the execution pin and create a widget. And what this is going to do is essentially load whichever widget blueprint we choose here onto the memory, and then if we drag out to add to viewport, it's going to add it on the screen. For the class, we are simply going to choose link HUD. So now if we compile, close that up, and press play, you can see we've got our hearts in the top left, we've got our magic, and we have also got our rupees. Although at the moment, they are not going to do anything, they're not going to change. And that's why we need to link some kind of information to this. So we need to set up a health variable, a magic variable, and also a rupees variable, and then set up some blueprints to go ahead and link all of this up. So open up your third person character, because this is what you're going to be using to store this information, and in the bottom left hand corner we are going to create a couple of variables. So press plus variable. With the first one, give it the name health, and then compile this, change the variable type to float. And the reason why we're using a float value is because it's a numerical value, and it's also going to allow us decimal points if we want this. So we can have 4.5, you know, hearts, we can have 4.25, you know, it's entirely up to you. But also, when we're creating a binding for the progress bars, it's expecting a float value. You'll see what I mean by that a little bit later on. For this, if you compile it, just set your default value to 5. And the reason why I've chosen 5 is because if we press play, you'll notice we've got 5 hearts in the top left. So if we tell this variable to take away 1 heart, all we got to do is just do 5 minus 1 with that, and that will be automatically reflected on the screen, which is quite nice. So with this, we're going to leave that as it is. We're going to add another variable, and this one's going to be for our magic. I'm going to hit compile, and this one, we are going to be going from 0 to 1. So I'm just going to set the default value to 1. So by default, they have got full sort of magic bar as it is. And then lastly, the last variable we're going to have is going to be an integer value. Now the reason why I'm using an integer value for this, and this is going to be for the rupees, the gems, or whatever you want to call it, is because you can't have 4.5 gems. It's a whole digit, a whole value, so there's no point sort of using a float if you don't need to. So what I'm going to do is compile this and set the default value to 0, and just make sure the variable name is rupees, just like that. So now what we need to do then is compile this, and then just go to our Zelda HUD assets folder, open up our link folder, and we need to create what is known as a binding to make some of the information in this widget blueprint change depending on those variables. So we want this little piece of text at the bottom here to change if the player has got more than 0 rupees. And the way we're going to do this is by creating a content binding. Select your text here, and what I'm going to do is under content and text, you can either manually put in some localized text in here, or you can go to bind, create binding, and you can use blueprints to go ahead and sort of do some maths and automatically generate that number. Now we need to get that number, that variable, from the third person character. So what we need to do then is sort of break this link that we've got already just by holding down Alt and then clicking it, and then we are going to cast to the third person character. Casting to the first person, or sort of casting rather, is just going to allow us to communicate with that blueprint class and get the information we need. For the object wildcard, this needs to be whatever this sort of blueprint is going to extend from. And now for me and the third person character, it's just simply going to be the player character, so get player character, as simple as that. And then as the third person character, get, and then you are looking for your number of rupees. So if you drag out as third person character, get rupees, just go ahead and get that value and hook this up to the return value for the return node. And what this is going to do is it is essentially going to ensure that it's always showing the latest version of your rupees information. What you can also do as part of this to text conversion, you can set the minimum integral digits to sort of a different value, because at the moment if I press play it's just going to say 0. If you want, you can make it say 0 0, or if it's 1, instead of it just saying 1, you can have it say 0 1. It's entirely up to you, and I'm going to do that. So I'm going to set this to 2, hit compile, hit play, and now you're noticing it's going to say 0 0. And what I'm going to do as a quick test to make sure that this is working and it's linked to that rupees variable, I'm going to open up my third person character for a moment here, and then I'm just going to go to my rupees, and I'm going to just sort of select this. Whoops, why have I got why have I moved the details panel? Sorry. So my rupees, I'm going to set the default value to 5, so the player has 5 of these. Press play, and you can see that has now been updated on the player's screen, which is perfect. So we've got our rupees all set up. Let's go back to the heads up display, to the design view, and start working on the health bar and the magic bar. So starting off with the health bar, this is going to be the one that is the most difficult. So what we need to do is we need to go down, go to progress, and once again we are going to be creating a percentage sort of binding. So press create binding on there. Once again, what we're doing is casting to the third person character, with the object wildcard being get player character. This time what we need to do is convert our health to sort of like a value that goes from 0 to 1, because that is what this progress bar is expecting. It's sort of expecting a number from 0 to 1. And the way that we're going to do this is divide the current health by the maximum health, and that is going to give us the number we want. So as third person character, get health to get the player's health, and then what we're going to do is we are just going to right click anywhere and do float divided by float, and then we are going to divide the health by 5, and 5 is the maximum health. So if I've done this right, it might be the wrong way around, but we'll check that in a second. If we compile this, go to third person character, set your health to 4, compile it, and this should give you 4 hearts. Press play and you can see that in the top left hand corner you've got 4 hearts. If I bring my third person character back, set this to 3, press play, you'll see the player has now got 3 hearts, and for the most part you can see quite clearly that our health bar is working exactly how we want it to. So lastly, there is only one more of these that we need to do, and that is going to be for our magic bar. So once again, I'm going to open up my blueprint for the link HUD, go to the design view and select my magic bar. With this, once again, we're creating a progress binding. Create the binding and then sort of give yourself a bit of space and simply cast to the third person character. Now this time, I already mentioned that the maximum amount of magic is going to be 1. So I'm going to be setting up the logic so it's going from 0 to 1, so we don't need to do any conversion here like we did with the other one. So what I'm going to do is, as third person character, simply get the magic, and then with this just hook it up to the return value, and that is it. For your object wildcard, just type in get player character, just like this. So by default the player should now have full magic, and if we just test this by opening up the third person character and then just go into my magic, let's set this to 50% magic, which would be 0.5, hit compile, and then if we go ahead and press play, you can see our progress bar for that magic is sort of now only half the way through that I wanted it to be, so it is exactly where it should be. So I'm pretty sure that we are done with our heads up display here. Now what we might do is later on down the road we might have some other user interface elements, but for the main heads up display we have got the bits that we wanted to work, so I am going to be ending the live stream here. Once again guys, I am going to thank you for all tuning in, and make sure you check out the next live stream which goes up next Monday, or if you're not watching this live, you guys can also just watch the converted edited video just like you are now. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, stay awesome, keep creating, your boy Virtus signing out. This video was made possible by my supporters on Patreon. If you want more videos like this, check out my Patreon page using the link in the description. To stay up to date on new releases, make sure you follow us on social media.